Hello, this is Brian Whitten and ET Art. I just wanted to start us off today where we finished last week. I made a video and put this up. I just wanted to start here. There was a couple of things I didn't discuss and I thought I would come back today and we'd have a look at that. And this is where I was showing you this rock seems, in my opinion, as many do, I seem to get this guy's facial feature, but he always seems to be wrapped around and very snug. In fact, living in Australia, you do not dress like that in the middle of winter. Yes, up in the hills, which is why I've come back here. Before I go on, if you are a young person at 13 or younger, I would prefer you go and get your parents to watch the video. If they say it's okay, well, that's fine. The reason I wanted to come back here is that this rock here that I found this on, I'll do an inserted picture that I call the face rock because of what it looks like. It's saying to me that we're cold. Sure, I live here in the middle of winter and it does get cold here, but what I wanted to discuss with you is why we're seeing the bridges chopped up, why we're seeing them cut down, and we've also discussed the likelihood they're going to lower the ocean level to resolve the problem of this whip high-speed motion that the Earth gets when it comes back in to the very, very strong horizontal plane of the sun. And that's where I wanted to go to today. I've just got Google Earth on the screen just for a minute. I will come back here very shortly, but the reason I wanted to come back here is that we have discussed to this point about the Earth when it hits the horizontal plane really speeding up very quickly. The calculated speed is about 16,000 miles an hour. Would obviously kill everybody on the planet and most living things other than things in the sea, I suppose, but the oceans would sweep across the land masses, which is why the pyramids and the megaliths are so big, because the problem is so big. I want you to be aware, as you would probably know, that the deepest part of the ocean is around 7 miles deep. The Mariana Trench, I'll show you where it is on the globe now, remembering that I'll just let it do a search first, and you can go and look at where it goes on the globe and where Australia is. It's directly above here. So I'm going to go back out again now, and you can look at where that is compared to Australia on the map or on the globe. It is very pertinent that that is the deepest ocean in this trench here, and why it's there is it's actually directly on line with the Australian Cape, and it is exactly in line with this image I'll show you now. And this is the bottom of Australia now, so if I show you that this is the really, really big comet that came in, or asteroid, or like I said, these are more likely a big chunk of Earth that are propelled back at the planet. This comes in at the bottom of Australia here and creates the Gulf for us, right over to here. It's actually this what tore all this out and created the highlands of New Guinea, and it is directly, the trenches right here. So it's exactly in line with the Gulf of Carpentaria, which was created here, which has told us, and it was also very important that I tell you that that actually happened as part of the last sequence, because the other 4 comets removed all the rest of the landmass here. So in actual fact we were separated from Asia at this point 6,000 years ago. However, we are not going to be separated from the Australian land, we are not going to be separated from the Asian landmass once they do what they need to do. And we've spoken about how much water has to be removed from the top of the planet. In other words, that he puts water inside the planet, goes around the core, and that stops that initial speed. That's how they do it. They use water and rotate it, or whether it rotates on its own, driven by the vertical planes of magnetism of the sun, may rotate some of it. I'll show you that later, but I wanted to show you that and make you aware that the deepest ocean is actually right on the line here, right? It's right on the line drawn by the creation or separation of this landmass here. all the other four we've shown you before landed here. Okay, I'll do an inserted picture now just to show you where they all landed. So there were 4 comets that landed here, which was after this event. I've also showed you this before and said that these were reflective of the 4 cycles and that we needed to have brakes, which is why they're like brake pads here. What they do to stop the Earth rotating so quickly. This one here was showing us that the North Pole, the landmass underneath the North Pole, was drilled out at this point in time. It was going very, very, very quickly. The landmass hadn't been protected by this boring out, and the landmass disintegrated because the ice on it disintegrates the landmass. The South Pole was protected, which is why the landmass is still in the South Pole. That is what they are telling us they do, and I've worked out why they do this, and I would expect that the water, when it gets drained, will get drained from the South Pole, and I will show you why I think that's the case. But I've also spoken to you about the fact that this is in actual fact telling us that the land masses can be bored out, not just to put water down into the planet or to roll planets along, and as much as I might say, or to roll a landmass along, and as much as that might sound ridiculous, and these balls are put in the holes under the landmass so that if the Earth accelerates very quickly, the landmass can snap off and roll on rocks like this. If they're right through, and these people have had 15 million years to do all this, and done it many, many times over with skills beyond anything we could possibly imagine, it sounds like an impossible thing to us. But then we look at this and think, well, maybe I'm not so far off the track here. Because in actual fact, when you look at that, may be the very remnants of a past situation where they've done exactly that and left it there for us to see how good they can do what they can do. Now I wanted to talk to you about the ocean level, because that is the important thing. I wanted to show you one other thing off the coast of the west coast, or pretty much San Francisco area. I will bring Google Earth back up. I will show you this first because this is where I got the information from, so that you realise who it is. So it's mysterious holes found off the coast of California, and it was put up by Paranormal Activity and Mysterious Stories. And what they wanted to make us aware of is all these holes have been drilled out here, and they don't know who did them. There's rows and rows and rows and rows of holes all the way through here. I'll open up on Google Earth and see if we can't see it a bit better. I know you're getting a little bit of reflection from my other window. I'll just try and stand in the way of that a little bit, but I just wanted to show you that this is where all the holes are. You can see it's just off the west coast of California here. It is very, very unusual. They don't know, they've never noticed them before, and this is something else that's just come up recently. And the reason why I wanted to show you those was to suggest that maybe what we're being told here is something else again. And once again, I will make note that that, to me, looks like a river, doesn't it? an old riverbed that's flowed at some point down here. So this was all above ground at some point. To have a running, meandering river like that, I would expect it's been running water at some point. And the ocean level's been out here, which is why I wanted to make this video, because it's going to be out here again. And that's why I believe we're seeing all the bridges chopped down in the rocks images, because they're just not needed anymore. We're crossing places where there's no water, there's no harbour. And I think the other problem is that we've got is exactly that. These holes that we see dug all over the place may not be just for that, and I will explain as I go along. I just wanted to show you this. It's online, it's on YouTube. It's called the Slow-Mo Guys. I've watched some of their work before. It's actually really quite impressive. I wanted to show you this because I want you to be aware of what I'm seeing here in the holes. And I know in Central Australia, where we've already seen the possibility of something hitting there, that if in actual fact there is resistance to something crashing, this is the same thing technically. If it hits a landmass that's solid, it's going to jolt the earth in itself. If it's going to hit a substance, in this case a bullet through water, slowing the bullet's speed, you know, it's the same principles we're looking at here. We're looking at the possibility of the asteroid or meteor or comet or whatever you want to call it. I would expect, like I said, it's a chunk of the South Pole cut off and hurled back at us to do what it needs to do, which is slow the Earth's rotational speed a little bit. I know we're getting up to the fast one, but slowing the speed, I believe, is going to stand up the axis a bit straighter, and that's what they need to do prior to us getting to the plane of the sun. I wanted to show you that because aren't we going to be doing exactly the same thing? Only one thing I wanted to say is I have had these and showed you them before. They're golden hats. They make out they're hats. They're actually not hats. I would expect they are directly related to the flat cycles. So in other words, when Earth is laid flat on its axis and allowed to go around the sun still, so in other words the pole that's pointing at the sun when it gets laid over is the one that favours through its cycle. In other words, it's always on the South Pole. It'll be the sun in the instance when they knock it over next time to push it out. It'll be the South Pole that's pointing towards the sun. The one here, the long one, of the all four hats, there's only been 4 of these found. They would be reflective, in my opinion, of the varying returning cycles from the outer ring, which is why we're seeing the smaller hats here have a brim on them. The taller one does not have a brim. The only ones that have the brim are the shorter ones, and I would expect these dots here reflective of hours in a day, so you'll see as it's going out it'll get faster and faster and faster. I've also said to you that I thought it was swivelling out that way. I'm not 100% sure, I'm not a physicist, but I'm absolutely certain with the hats that is what it's telling us, that these varying cycles here coming back in are at a varying length. In other words, that they don't always turn it up and stand it back up straight at exactly the same place when it's coming back, and it would be, in my opinion, to do with the revolutionary speed or the speed of rotation of Earth that depicts whether it's going to be stood up quickly or let come in further before it gets stood up. That's why I think we're seeing 2 different size hats here, and I wanted to say that you get an indication on the return cycle here that there are multiple locations they stand up here. It's not always the same place, and that is why I believe that's the case. The other thing I wanted to show you was this. Once again we go back to the Voynich manuscript, and I said to you that this looks like a sequence that when we have one of the sequences we have rotates the Earth and creates a situation where the plane of Earth, where it travels on, it takes about 6,000 years to go around like this, and we end up going back around the sun in the opposite direction, which is what I've said this is. But that could also be very similar to what I've just shown you, in that it may very well be reflective of this. You know, it's almost the same thing again. 2 lines going in a loop and going back. So it's also very similar. So I'm saying the Voynich manuscript, like I said, with not only with the plant life in it, but I would see that that's exactly what we're being told, and the substantial amount of water that goes into here is, I would expect, drop our ocean levels by about 1,600, well, a mile. Just how much they're going to drop. Our ocean levels will drop by a mile, and I will not be living here at 17 metres above sea level. I will be 1,617 metres above sea level. That's exactly what I wanted to put in today's video, to let you know that that's what I believe is the case. Not only that, but when I said to you, if I bring you back to this now and see that this is where the North Pole was removed, so in other words it's actually sealed off, because at the point that this happened it wasn't the North Pole, it was the South Pole, just like we're going through now. The point is that the way the water was managed to move in. Here's another location where exactly the same thing is shown. Now this was another one that was in India, I believe, this river, and it was never seen. These were never visible until the river level had dropped to the point they could see them, only just now. So we've got the same thing here now in an Indian river that we have in our own rivers over here, that we've got no water in them, and I would imagine I might go for a bit of a drive one day. But you can see what I'm talking about here. And what we're seeing here is the very same thing represented. Once again, it's to do with water. And I'm absolutely certain that what they do is they'll then allow the South Pole to do what this did last time, and the South Pole will be used. And once they do allow this speed to get up, because this is the thing, if they run that water into the planet now, once they lay it flat and it starts to move out, it's actually the precession of the planet on the wobble it has on it that actually moves the water back out of the inner core of the planet, and that's why they lay it flat. So when it's getting pushed out there, they're getting the water back out of the planet by the rotational movement of the planet as it's going back to the outer ring, and that's exactly what happens. And then once the water is out of the planet, so in other words, when it's laid flat to move it back out here again, it's allowed to do this. And the reason for that is it's now the North Pole, and it got sealed off. So in other words, they melt the landmass of rock back over. Remember, there's nobody on the planet when this happens, so it's quite okay to let it do its thing. And it'll bore down and melt the rock and seal the holes that are currently doing exactly what they're going to do. So I would expect what we're going to see. One more thing I wanted to discuss before moving on were the golden hats again. We have a brim on three. The three of them have a brim. They are varying height. The one that doesn't have a brim is the longest, tallest one, which is, as I've mentioned, it's the one where it gets laid out and pushed to the outer ring. But when we look at these with brim on them, that implies, if it's a hat, shade. It implies that when it's getting stood up, which is why another reason why these might be of varying length, is that it's actually stood up on the way back in from the outer ring, and the moon does not go with the planet here. The moon stays cycling around the sun, because the very next thing it has to do when it comes back into the inner ring is have the moon cycling and rotating around the sun, not Earth. Because as soon as we hit the inner plane, we still have to have this, which is why this is like this, I would suspect, or what we're being told, is the moon is left to cycle around the sun, and we are stood up at a time where we know going further out, we still move, it still takes us the same time through space. We know that from the other temple, the Tirumali complex. I'll show you that very shortly, but I would suspect that what we're being told here is when the planet gets stood up, it is in sync with the moon still, which is why we're seeing a brim on the smaller of the three or four hats, I should say. These are two. There is another third one, but all three have a brim except for the longest and tallest one. I would expect it is not pushed out in sync with the moon in that instance, because it wants full sun on the South Pole to melt the ice, keep it melted, so that the water and oceans can be pulled back out of the planet as it's making its move out to the outer ring again. That's what I believe we're seeing here in the distance of height here, is how quick we are stood up within the 6,000 sequence, come back in, and that we are shown cover here on all three of these. So in other words, it's pushed at a time so that when it comes back in and meets with the inner ring of rotation, it's already in sync with the moon, and the moon is rotating around the sun, not Earth as it currently is. I wanted to discuss again the image we see here, which is, in my opinion, telling us of the two periods of time we spend on the inner ring of rotation on Earth, where we are in plane with a horizontal plane, that being the first 32,000 or 32-hour day there, this being our, where we are approaching. We have been on our half loop cycle, we are approaching this point here. This is a period of time we spent 6,000 years off cycle or off the horizontal plane. We're seeing that he comes from this world, he gets here, he stays here the whole time and then goes back whilst we go through our 6,000 year unnatural cycle. He then returns, comes here. The one difference between here and here is this. See what we're seeing here? This is the difference. And here, right? So to me, I would see this as saying that there is something additional here. Well, we know the sun is not going to change. Our distance from the sun is the same here as it is here. The only difference is the rotational speed of the planet. So if rotating is quicker here, this would be, in my opinion, the water going into the inner core, because you don't need it here, because it's spinning slower and it's in a situation where it's got meshed planes. It's going to be consistent, a 32-hour day, and does not need the water inside the planet at the time here, but it does here because it's going too fast. And the whip speed of motion is why I'm saying this is what this is about. It's having to put the water in the planet before we get there. And this is the problem with the bridges being cut down, is that we've got the same thing. If the oceans go out and are 1,000 feet lower, we still can't trade or get a boat in and out of anywhere to trade with other countries. So this is why I believe they come here soon enough to tell us all what's going down. But this is what's going to happen. I would expect we see our ocean levels will start to decrease. So I would expect them to be here before that, but then I don't know. Like I said, I've had to go at dates. I've given up trying to pick dates. I can tell you now, all I know is, for me to know all this really and work it all out, it's not because it's going to happen in 1,000 years. I would expect this is all going to happen within the next year or so. I could be wrong, and I've tried to guess. I'm not trying to guess. I've tried to work it out from the megaliths when it's going to be. You know, a lot of it relies on whether you get the truth told you from the people that run our world, and they don't tell us the truth. It's half the problem. I've just brought us back to the Tirumali Jan complex in India. Once again, Praveen Mohan, as was the couple of those other images that I've mentioned to you, were on his documentaries. Now that we know the cycles of the Earth and the way it works, we are looking at this being our cycle that isn't finished yet, this being the horizontal plane of the sun, and these cycles here. And I said to you I wasn't sure that whether there's one there or not. I don't think there is. I think the difference in speed out here, whether you go left or right or anti-clockwise or clockwise, it doesn't make a whole lot of difference. It's, you know, 7, 8, 9 and 10 hours a day out here. I don't even think they do this cycle here. I could be wrong, but now that I know this cycle here is on the way in, I'm not 100% sure whether they do that every time. There are things within the Voynich manuscript where you have the same amount of characters twice in a row. There's nowhere in the sequence does that, so maybe they vary the sequence depending on the people on the planet at the time. I do not know. There are things I'm not 100% sure of. This is a red line going down here when we see the very bottom of this cycle here. So I would expect that this is dependent or reflective of Nibiru coming in and rotating around Jupiter. Is that in actual fact it happens when we're off plane. So in other words, about 3,000 years ago, when we were in the middle of this cycle, I would have expected Nibiru was going around Jupiter. The reason I wanted to come back here is because now I said to you at one point this was a fast cycle, this is a slow cycle and so on. I was saying it's wrong, albeit it is, but it may not be wrong because there's so many of their things mean more than one thing. I'm going to say that what this is the anti-clockwise cycle, which is why it's going that way from the red line. This is the clockwise cycle. So if we look at the time here as to whether we're going clockwise or anti-clockwise around the sun, where in actual fact there's not a lot of difference in the time from there to there as there is to there to there. Where we do notice is that when we're going further away here, there's time, if this is a clock face, which is why it's in the wall, it's letting you know the time that it takes to go from any, from a given point out there to there. In the outer ring, it's the same time to go from there to there. So in other words, the mass of the planet is being moved through space quicker in the outer ring, not just rotating quicker. So that's what I wanted you to be aware of there. And like I said, it is hard on this one to see if that's ever been done, whether it ever gets done. There doesn't seem a lot of point to it, especially when you're flipping the globe over here and doing another cycle within here, right? So in other words, you're doing a cycle to come back into here, which is about 4,000 years long. We discussed in the last one, and I would wonder as to whether you're even bothering doing that. So there's a few things that are conflicting that I'm not 100% sure of, but I'm certain that's why we're seeing blue ring on the inside here, because we're actually, in actual fact, moving water within the core of the planet. This may be reflective of that as well. Like I said, there are many of their diagrams and building structures mean more than one thing. It's not always easy for me to work out what the message is. I would say, like I said though, that when we're shifting here and we're off plane with the sun, they don't worry about moving the moon. The rims are on the hat to say that you will be provided shade, some shade from the sun. But we're not on plane with it. We're not on the horizontal plane. The horizontal plane's here. And we know that this cycle takes us off the plane here when it moves us back in about 2,000 to 3,000 years. And then they move us the other way, the rest of the way, off plane with the sun, off the horizontal plane. You've still got the two rotating vertical planes, but I'm certain that is why it is the way it is. I thought that the brims might be on the hat because it is pushed back in there with a straight axis in here, but I don't think that's the case. So I think what's actually happening is we're getting 4,000 years off cycle, but when we come into here, because the moon was already going around the sun on an inner ring of rotation, further in than we are currently at the moment, that when it comes back in and joins the inner ring, it's in sync already, and that's why the hats have a brim on them. Is because they come into the plane with the moon already in position, and it's moved when we do our natural cycle here. So 6,000 years ago, the moon too would have been rotating around the sun and not the earth as it is at the moment. I just wanted to show you before I finished up today, I pretty much discussed with you what I wanted to discuss, and that is the water and the depth of water. I believe, like I said, about my house here, I would expect, is going to be about 1,600 metres above sea level, not 17. That's what's going to happen. I wanted you to view, if you would, this sort of feature here that we have on these megaliths. I have shown you in another video this before, but I wanted to do this again because I'll show you the next image, and I'll show you at a microscopic level, very same image, the very same facial feature. Now, I did put a video up some time back called Evolution. Do you not see the same feature there that I just showed you on those megaliths? That's exactly the same face, in that you've got the eyes round like that with your nose. It's exactly the same thing, but it's a microscopic level, that I can tell you now. There was nobody chipping away here with a copper chisel and a hammer or a wooden, copper chisel on a rock. That's not what this is happening here. This is very, very highly technical, highly advanced laser printing, 3D laser printing. Absolutely unbelievable, some of the technology on these rocks, but you can not dispute that that is exactly the same shape as I've just shown you. Now let's do that again on another rock, and let's see if in actual fact it is the case. Now, I've just brought this up as a guy had posted these pictures there. I'll be honest with you, I'm not 100% sure where they are again, and I wish I did, but I think they might even be in Australia, to be honest. I want you to look at that feature of this head here. There's his eye, there's his mouth, and he's got this ridge across the top of his head again. If I showed you that at a microscopic level, with exactly the same head, well, we've just done it twice in a row now. Okay, I'll show you a microscopic version where the guy's head is exactly the same as that. And here off to the left, we have exactly the same feature again. The same guy's head. His eye, his nose, his mouth, and his crested head. And you could dispute that's what it is, but that's exactly what it looks like. I'll go through a couple of pictures on this because I won't vary any of this, okay? I'll go through a few photos for you of the same rock. Now I'm going to just go through a couple of pictures of the very same rock. You can see that guy's head, part of it's just there. This is the one that had the pyramid here, and there are no casing stones on the pyramid. Also, it's the one that tells you what star system they went to when they left. I wanted to go through a couple of these just to show you the changes that you can get in this area on the rock just by changing your light angle. We were also told in here, in my opinion, we could be getting told here that they have a way of holding back, you know, to protect things. To me that almost says this on this rock. There's a lot of waves and that here. You can see the waves washing up on the side of the pyramid here as well. Some of the images off this rock are really quite amazing. I'll just go along a little. You see what I'm saying there, but it looks like they're sort of they're saying to us they can shield it. They can shield it here, you know, maybe what they're trying to tell us. The changes you get, like I said, that's that guy's head there. You can see it really quite clearly, his nose and his eye, his mouth, and he's got the crested head. It's exactly the same as the rock that I just showed you. Once again, we moved along a little further, and we then see he tells us he went to this place. Oops. We move along a little further and we can see here where he said he left. This is the star sign Taurus here. Got a bull here. You can almost start to see his face come out here as well. And when I say his, I mean him as a modern day reptilian, not as a dinosaur. It's actually the same one that brought us this one, which is a duck-billed dinosaur, or a dinosaur wearing glasses. So this is the very same portion of the rock that the pyramid's being seen on. This part here, as you can see, that's the part that brought up his glasses. That's the pyramid in here. So it's like I said, I would see that we're being told in some of these ones, when you vary the light a little, that you're actually being told we have the ability to be able to protect this. So, albeit I said this pyramid and what is in it depicts something that happened 6,000 years ago. Yes, it did, but it also happened about 106,000 years ago, or 206,000 years ago, as long as the sequence is followed. And I do see variations in the sequence, and I would expect that's got to do with possibly us, how mankind reacts to them coming back in and doing what it is they've got to do to keep us all alive here. So I thought I'd just show you that as well, because it was really quite interesting. Yes, now I found that quite interesting to come back here and find that this face here with his crested head is exactly what they're saying one of us look like. And I would actually expect there's a couple beings that have come from the reptilians, including ourselves, and another one with a crested head, and he as well, the large skull grey alien. We all seem to be getting told, in my opinion, what we're being told is the way we look now, right? This is where we came from, but the way we look now, we were like what we look now 15 million years ago when the other sun left, because we used to have two stars, and this whole thing has been brought about the fact that we only have one where we used to have two, and traversing or rotating around the sun on the horizontal plane is not without their help. I'll just finish up now just talking to you a little bit about Wilson's Rock. This is the one we found, or he found I should say, twice, but it was, I understood it basically that mark, and that mark. There's 3 marks down this line in a straight line like that. I guess finding that when I first saw it, I didn't think this at the time was an Aboriginal artefact. I thought it was something, you know, it just, to me it just didn't look like that. There was oddities like this. There's an insert here as well. I'll expand that just a little bit so you can see that the insert here is really quite prominent when you pick the rock up. It is really quite odd, and because I don't know why, I just thought that at the time when it came to my recollection of what it meant, that this was talking about the equator and the tropics being created, and it was a rock that was directly reflected to the movement of the planet, because I saw those 3 rocks being equally spaced, put in the line that was across the rock. So it wasn't a stupid thing to think, and I had watched a lot of those movies and videos and documentaries about the megaliths of the Earth, all on 1 kilometre ring around the planet, and I was aware of that. So when I saw this, I thought that was quite an unusual thing. But what I wanted to talk to you about is how you look at things, because I said to you in that case, if that was representative of Easter Island, it was the very line that goes to the pyramids where the line of longitude that had been tipped by this inserted image. This is the bottom of South America, and the line created by drawing from Easter Island to the pyramids, which ironically, there's 3 pyramids in Cairo, which is where I went. They're reflective, I thought at the time, of longitude and the turning of the Earth, but they are also reflective, depending on which way you want to look at it, the sizes of the 3 pyramids themselves. So it wasn't a stupid thing. This is why I said to you that the diagrams and designs have more than one meaning. But if I was to say, okay, well, if I rotate the rock that way and see what we are looking at here, because if we're saying that held that way, the very same rock found in Australia, on the very same line, if I follow that down like that and down like this, come to down here to New South Wales, which is where we found the rock. That's why I've put this in the background, but I just wanted to say, okay, but if I'm going that way, we could be talking, yes, okay, there was a really, really big rock, as we've just discussed, that created the Gulf of Carpentaria here, because that's what we are told happened. And we've just discussed that in the video to this point, that that comet landed, or the chunk of Earth, wherever they grasped it from, and hurled it this way to tilt the planet over, to move it out, which was an event in the past. This one, that the rock that did that, what has to hit here, it's the size of what's on the sides of this rock, because there's 2 white marks there, whereas this one is brown. Might mean it's already hit, and that is already completed and finished. And this part of the rock, if we're to read it that way, could mean that I need to come in here, right here, and right there, because there's 2 marks right there, and that's a very, very deep ocean, very close to the coast. It is also not a bad place if I was going to have to do something to fill it up with crocodiles or something, and then there won't be that many people there. But if I was to read that rock looking at it that way, you would think it bears food for thought. I'll do an inserted image now of the side of that rock so you can see the dots that I'm pointing at more clearly. But if that is held that way, it is certainly found at the end of that line. That is something I thought I might finish off with today. I think I might finish off with that anyway, and just let you know that there is more than one way to look at most things, but I would think the other way got me to go and look at the pyramids, and most of that I think is, most of it's pretty right now. I've had a lot of help from people that left these, I would expect. But yeah, that is something that bears food for thought, doesn't it? Anyway, that's Brian Whitten and ETR. Have a nice day. Bye bye.